me and Hamid, we start to rewrite our chapter, and this is the first part of it, contains situational changes. In general, speaking about situational changes in those three countries, we can select only two common trends, despite the fact that it is actually much more indicators. For our other indicators, there are no similarities which could be used in this analysis. So we figured out only two, and first one is reconfiguration of balance of powers. And this reconfiguration of balance of powers in all three countries following the same scenario. First of all, on the wave of protests and wave of political instability and political crisis, government appointed a new extraordinary elections, and in these elections, different Islamist powers, different Islamic parties, using the protest attitudes of the citizens, and won the elections and get the majority in the parliament. And this growing presence and influence of Islamic political parties then change it with response from different actors in political field, which trying to limit their power and trying to balance the situation. And as I already said, common scenario of changes is starting the protests, on the wave of mass protests, on the biggest protest, Islamic parties' popularity raising during the protests, they won the elections. Then they, using disappointment and demands of citizens to push up the new, more Islamic, more religious agenda. And then on the wave of this new agenda, different actors trying to balance the situation and change it. And usually it leads to new extraordinary elections where those parties losing the majority in the parliament, and sometimes conditions for them became even worse than just lose the majority. Speaking about the cases. First of all, Tunisia. In 2011, after resignation, not actually resignation, disappointment of President Ben Ali, Tunisian Islamic party is called Ennahda, became a dominant political force, and they using all contradictions between old and new political elites to build up their own political agenda. And as a result of this strategy, they get unconditional victory on 2011 parliament elections. They got around 89 seats in the parliament, and the majority in the parliament at all. Where their closest opponent, Congress for the Republic Party, got only 8.7% and only 29 seats. But using this possibility, they try to establish a new proposals to the constitution and use constitutional reform in the country as a part of new Islamic policy. They trying to make Sharia law as a source for legislation. They trying to impose some limitations on secularity of the state. And as a result, after 3 years, new extraordinary parliament elections were appointed, and Ennahda loses these elections to new political party called Nida Tunes. This party established by the new Tunisian president Beji Caid Essebsi. And after this reconfiguration, Islamists are not the majority of the parliament right now, and they're kind of in opposition. So after wave of protest, the reconfiguration led to such situation in Tunisia. Another case is Egypt, and in Egypt it was the most harsh scenario for Islamic party, because after resignation of Mubarak, previously banned organization called Muslim Brotherhood and its leader Mohamed Morsi. They use all protest attitudes and all protest sentiments of the citizens to raise in power, and they make an alliance with a number of small Islamic parties existed in Egypt, and they organized one joint force called Freedom and Justice Party, and won the elections in 2012 by getting 47% of the total votes and get the biggest majority in the parliament. Unfortunately for them, political initiatives of Muslim Brotherhood and new Egypt President Mohamed Morsi led party from this success to absolute crash, because military forces, which are always strong in Egypt, using a negative attitude of citizens to new reforms, and just actually realize a coup d'etat. Mohamed Morsi was detained and then sentenced to death for abuse of power. A lot of members of Muslim Brotherhood were detained. More than 500 people who were part of this organization were also sentenced to death. And after these events, Muslim Brotherhood and the political party, which was organized by this organization, was completely destroyed and didn't even participate in new parliament elections, which was won by the party backed by military forces. And right now, after this situation in Egypt, we've got something like military authoritarian regime led by Marshal Assisi, and Islamic parties were completely destroyed and removed from political field. Only one party right now, which somehow could be called Islamic, exists. It is Salafi party, and on the last election they get only 7% of the votes. And the last country in this segment is Morocco. And in Morocco, Islamic Party Justice and Development faced with lightest outcomes comparing with Tunisia and Egypt, because they were very systemic party. They existed from the mid of 20th century, but was not so popular in society. But on the wave of protests in 2011, they made kind of alliance with representatives of trade unions, with representatives of different civil organizations and moderate Islamic parties. And on the wave of these protest attitudes, they won the elections and get the highest result in their party history. But unfortunately, we cannot say what kind of different negotiations, what kind of different agreements were accomplished during this period, because in Morocco, political field and political relations are much more heightened than in any other countries which we try to analyze, and we can only try to speculate about how and why representatives of king and palace decided to deal with representatives of this Islamic Party and Justice Development Party. As I already said, they reached the highest result in their history, 22.8% of votes and 107 seats in the parliament. Based on this result, party leaders had tried to set more Islamic-oriented agenda. They also tried to establish Sharia law as a main source of legislation in the country, and tried to use constitutional reform in their own interests. But this strategy and this behavior from their side led to kind of difficult conditions for them, because all other political parties and different political actors unified and tried to create a balance. And then after a series of negotiations and agreements, Party of Justice and Development agreed on particular compromise. Party formed a coalition with three parties that had been part of previous government and could be named as baked by the palace. But PhD leader Abdullah bin Karim was appointed as the Prime Minister of Morocco. So in this case, we can see a process of certain cooptation when a political party were captated by the representatives of power, by the palace, and then created a new political landscape. Second common trend for all three countries is constitutional reforms, because this trend was almost parallel for all three countries, and adoption of new constitution was kind of the biggest demand and the biggest result of demands from side of the protesters. Reasons for such reform were the same for three countries: mass protests and citizen demands for justice and democracy. But because the demand for justice was much more stronger than the demand for democracy, outcomes of such reforms were kind of controversial for every country. In Morocco, constitutional reform started in 2011 as a part of a set of reforms proposed by King. And this reform was focused on very difficult tasks, because from the one hand, it was a task to save King's power, but from another part was the task to put some formal limitation on his power, provide more guarantees and possibilities for realization of citizen rights and freedoms. And as a result of series of negotiations, constitution broadens the power of the parliament, let it to pass laws on most issues without formal agreement from the palace, takes some steps toward protecting the independence and competition in the judicial system, and also increase the role of a number of independent commissions which working with governmental bodies. So it was more or less more democratic, but all of the limitation which was put on the king was absolutely formal, and Morocco is still the kind of constitutional monarchy, but where the king had almost absolute power still. In Egypt, the agenda of constitutional reform was close to Morocco, but from different point of view, because in Egypt, constitutional reform was driven by a sense of urgency, because after the detainment of Mohamed Morsi, a new military government was in a really rush, and they need to establish kind of strong political regime which could prevent the country from similar situation when protests led to political instability and to mass riots. And after tremendous violence and bloodshed in the weeks leading up to Mubarak's resignation, and then after arrest of Morsi and members of Muslim Brotherhood, country new leadership, the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, under the leadership of new Egyptian President Marshal Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, moved to creation of particular framework for super presidential republic. And in Egypt, it was a second try of adoption a new constitution for 2 years. And after a very arguable constitution draft proposed by Muslim Brotherhood and Mohamed Morsi, new presidents seek to launch a very mild constitutional reform that brings several democratic innovations, but mostly will be focused only on return on status quo established during Mubarak's presidency, where military forces has all the power. And last case here is Tunisia. And in Tunisia, the situation developed very differently, because despite a very difficult months after revolution, which were marked by struggle between old and new political elites and the resignation of democratically elected government. Tunisia, anyways, adopted new constitution in January 2014, and text was developed by a special commission, which contains from different political forces, from Islamic parties to liberally and secularly oriented philosophers and dissidents. And this document was a part of very serious compromise between all political forces in Tunisia. And even European Commission and Venice Commission, in their analysis of this document, resulted that this text could be notified as the most liberal constitution in the Arab world, with very specific attention to division of powers, decentralization, guarantees of political and civil rights. And one of the main tasks of new Tunisian government was to establish a situation and establish a legislation framework which will prevent country from return to any sort of authoritarian rule. So that's all. Waiting for your questions.
Thank you very much. If you have questions, you're welcome, but I just want to comment on the text that Artyom sent to me. Yeah, and this text is very close to the presentation, and I sent this text to all of you, as it's okay in general. And if the previous text that you submitted to the previous Monday seminar was not a text that we can include in the chapter, we discussed it previous seminar that it was too descriptive. So the case was not you, not Victor was here, so that is why I repeat. Yeah, so there was too descriptive. You describe separately one country, then another country, then third country. Yeah. So, and we decided that this time they have to be completely rewritten in a form that there have to be comparative analysis in a way that first we will figure out similar trend for all 3 or 4 countries. And then we describe this trend, and then give data that prove that this is the similar trend for these countries. And today our term text is okay in this sense that there is a trend and there is a general similar to all countries. And but it's only about 2 trends. Well, here we can still argue constitutional reforms is a part maybe of constitutional change, but we have a lot of things that we can work with in the text, but the difference between previous week and this week text is that this text can go, can be, with, of course, from my point of view, because we have 2 another editors. So from my point of view, this text can be corrected. Not completely rewritten, but we can work with it. That is why I think we will distribute it to all.
So I have several questions. Is it
Yes.
the right time to ask? In terms of comparison, could you just, knowing that material, build it in sort of, chart with comparison, so it would visually. So what were the main similar points, and what were the main differences? Because when you have 3 countries, they're kind of also divided between themselves, and they are showing some big division, because Tunisia is praised as the most stable democratic outcome, while Egypt, for example, is seen with all the turmoil, and this might not be the last part of transition, so it might be shaken again. So, first question is that what are the common features of the 3 countries, and what are the different things of each country? That's the first question. So could we make some visual presentation of that? And the outcome, if you're planning to do the outcome of that influences, is that which of three countries, so they've proven it, what would be the proof that among those three, that Tunisia made it more successful for democratic transition and other countries kind of follow. Is that clear?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'll start from the last part of the question, because for Tunisia, we've got a number of indicators for situational changes, for institutional changes, for policy changes, and also for political, social, cultural issues. And looking on these indicators, we can clearly see that Tunisia improved its position, for example, in democracy indexes, different democracy indexes, not only one, by kind of 50% higher. So it is really clear result that after revolution and after two new democratically elected governments, Tunisia right now in a way to creation of stable democracy, more or less. And Tunisia is kind of bright example of the Arab Spring as a good result when political parties and different political forces, including Islamists, more moderate powers, Western-oriented intelligence, and so on, they found kind of common ground and right now trying to build up a good, stable government. In case of differences between these countries, actually differences are prevail, because for situational changes, it is more than 10 indicators. And we were able to find only 2 indicators which are similar for all 3 countries. And it is the issue because conditions and reasons for the protest in the all 3 countries were more or less the same. It is economical issues, demand for justice, political liberties, and so on. But because of different environment in the country, because of their different history and different combination of institutions, results also were different. In Tunisia, we've got good results. In Morocco, we've got kind of status quo where powers trying to manipulate in all the forces included in the political process, and king is still the absolute power in this political landscape. And in Egypt, we've got a short moment of liberalization when all the parties became official. They made new democratic elections, very open and free. And on those elections, actually Islamic forces won, and they just led country to crisis, another one. And as a result of this crisis, military forces just made coup d'etat, and right now it is very authoritarian state, actually returning to the situation which was under Mubarak rule. So different outcomes, but the same reasons of protest, and this chapter in general called as triggers of democratic development. And in all 3 cases, we can see how protests become triggers. But unfortunately, the results of this triggering were absolutely different and not so democratic.
I believe it will be useful to explain that.
Yeah.
Of course, but it is just the first part of the subchapter.
It's not a criticism, it's just thinking out loud. Because as Dimitri had said, to avoid just description, we need to put more attention should be given to comparison.
Yeah.
And so what are the factors that are the same and how did they presented themselves, and what are the key differences? Like the starting point, as you said, are more or less the same. The outcomes were very different. So what led to these differences in the outcomes? I think it just needs to be kind of formulated and analyzed.
Yeah. My question would be this. So, okay, so the book is studying protest publics, which are kind of more or less spontaneous, more or less rooted to different kinds of political institutions. But, they can, I guess, in a way, what we're studying is kind of spontaneity. Is this sort of spontaneous, more or less spontaneous? I guess the question of spontaneity is something to be explored, but that's kind of, I guess, one of the problematics that I think about when I think about protest publics. So here, if we're studying the different ways in which political change interact with protest publics. I'm wondering if you could expand on how something like a protest public that is somewhat that changes over time, it can be due geographically in one area or another. How do these sorts of protests interact and cause or not cause or whatever the kinds of changes that you're describing here? So I mean, what I see is sort of a historical comparison of different kinds of changes between the countries. What I guess I'd probably ask is, how do these different political processes, how are they connected to the waves of protest publics in the different countries?
It is not marked here actually, but first of all we've got special subchapter dedicated to protest public and its role in changes and protests. But speaking about those particular changes, common trends, all of them were caused by protest public actually, because it was not a decision of government, spontaneous decision that, okay, let's try to make a constitutional reform. It was a serious pressure from different protest groups, including very heterogeneous participants, and they asked for justice, for human rights, for political rights. Like, we are tired of this situation when we are not able to speak up, we are not able to participate in political processes. We want to have something. And in all three countries, constitutional reform was a result of kind of compromise between demands of protest publics and possibilities and decisions of ruling party, president, king, and so on.
Okay, so did protest publics just bring these issues onto the agenda?
Yes.
Or did they continue throughout the process of change, or did they rise and fall at different times? Do you know what I mean? I'm saying this is happening over time.
In each case, they bring it to the agenda, but in different countries, they participated differently. In Egypt, it was like, okay, we achieved at least something, and then protest attitudes more or less disappear. In Tunisia, it is continuing process. We've got different representatives of protest public. Right now, they are more or less institutionalized. They created their own political parties, some sort of civil society organization, non-government organization, and they participated in politics. In Morocco, it was, I suppose, the most difficult case because it is a lot of hidden negotiations. We could only suppose that some sort of agreements between representatives of protest public and government and palace exist, but unfortunately it's very complex to track it.
Can I follow up on
У
that?
нас еще два доклада.
Okay, just, it's important what Victor is pointing out. Could we get a little deeper on that? Because if the whole volume is dedicated to protest publics, and interesting to know, after the spontaneous, lasting, and very courageous protest, either those publics transform themselves into regular actors, like parties and movements and NGOs, or they disappear, so that they kind of melted itself, and then the other actors, kind of grabbed the initiative. Like the parties who were not very much on top, they said, okay, now that's a chance for us. And this, I believe, this is the major difference in all the three countries, where the quality of public was like in Tunisia. They had enough strength to keep protesting. And this is why if they are not satisfied, they move on and still keeping to be an actor. While in Egypt, it is said that they kind of raised up to big protest, shaking the political regime, and then they kind of dissolve, and the other actors start, taking the initiative. Is this picture?
Yes.
Right? Because I think for theoretical outcomes, we can bring up, such a notion as quality of protest public. Because sometimes when people are very young and they were student-based, and they were kind of religious-based or something. It's not enough glue to keep them together, keep protesting. So they raise it once, they've shaken political system, and then kind of disappear. While in the other countries, and what really makes a difference of building more stable regime is that the protest publics keep living on. Probably they, shifting, changing, but this phenomenon itself didn't disappear. So they keep pushing, keep pressing.
Yes, they keep in their presence, saving their presence
So
in the political.
for me, it is just a hypothesis because I don't know the region. But what I'm telling is what you can recognize that it's the true conclusion, because then it may be a really serious conclusion that we can include in some other countries descriptions that kind of quality of public, so that are they stay together, do they kind of keep up communication on certain issues, do they interact, so they have some representative bodies so that they keep being visible, because what has been written in a similar book which you all know with Arbatli and Rosenberg, they had for Russia that it's colorless protest, it just jumps up and then dissolved and nothing left behind. And this would be interesting to see if we can assess the quality of publics that can kind of continue making pressure till they have a good outcome. So there might be many elections, there might be many kind of reforms, but we the people who are not satisfied, we kind of keep pushing for that. Would it be kind of possible to characterize the protest publics itself?
Yes, I think it could be included as a preliminary outcome of the chapter, just because it is important finding that not all the public is the same. We can say about differences in quality, in level of attractiveness of slogans and so on, in level of post-institutionalization, because we can see more institutionalized structures like in Tunisia, or we can see some informal networks which exist in Morocco. And so there are kind of differences.
In some places the process is open and we can really trace it.
Yeah.
And in some cases, like we see in Morocco, it's just all
not
closed.
transparent at all.
Okay. And the suspicion is it's all kind of manipulated by the palace, by the king.
Yeah, it looks like.
Okay. More questions?
Okay.
Because I think, in these...
I just had a small remark here, just because in the previous book that Dr. Vilera had just spoken about, related with Arbatli and Rosenberg, one of the chapters that I was writing is about the multitude of invisibles. So there are disparate chunks of community, and I was just trying to describe the community's characteristic, that who these people are. So they are lumping together, and that further gives you a kind of certain credence for writing purpose, and it was to explain it. But why, if at all, this thing has changed at the situational level, or the situation of why it has happened, and you create more rational discourse.
So you think they can, the authors of these chapters can use?
Yeah, I mean, just an idea. I mean, that is something that I wrote. I'm certainly making the paper.
We will have a more deep look.
For sure, that's what I think. Just have a look.
And describing, is there any sociological material for these countries already
For
published?
sure,
Like,
Yes,
Well,
we've got
How
some
old,
collected
whether they-
data about demographic portrait of the protester.
right.
Not for all countries, unfortunately. For Morocco, we don't have such. But for Egypt and Tunisia, it is absolutely clear.
Did they change in time, or they're kind of the first group that came for protest is more or less the same group?
It is changing, but not so dramatically.
Okay. Because I think what is the key points of the book and why people should buy it, as we ask, is that there be some serious innovation. Why do we need to look not at established movement, but in a loose category of publics that in certain cases they can keep on working, not even building up the new party or the new institution, but they keep that energy and demands. Very important that they are not stopping getting some little progress for democracy, but they want to bring it towards the kind of recognition of open political process, of changing powers, of open elections, and they kind of keep pushing for that. That might be a really good outcome for the whole.
Yeah,
For the whole
it is important part of our analysis.
Okay, so you're looking into that,
Of
right?
course.
Is there enough sociological material written by other people?
Not for all countries, but
So Morocco is the
more or
problem,
less good for us.
Questions?
right? So you're saying there are 2 more reports?
Sam is ready,
Okay, let's.
and then Nikita.
It's a fully well-developed seminar, right?
Yeah, as I said, that we have some institutionalized team for now. So we have at least 4 chapters. Yeah, Fyodor is not ready today, but he was ready previous Monday.
You already made a presentation on
Online.
Russia?
Oh,
You
yeah.
already made a presentation. Okay. Do you look into the quality of what is published?
No,
No?
not yet.
Now that is very useful because we need to say something new. And the success of the previous theories of theory of movements was that it makes up an explanatory power, how people get together and how movement keeps moving. So if we're suggesting a new actor as artist publics, we really need to see how they're different from the movement, but they still have some body, some key personalities or key institutional attitudes that they promote, so that we can say that this public kind of keep on working as a public, so it doesn't disappear. Well, in Russia, this is a very small core group that made a political party and then several NGOs.
Mhm.
So it would be good to keep that things together. So I said, what is left? What is left of Russian Party's public? And then we see that Party Gabriel and several NGOs that were built on top of that, like volunteers and those who went to. Okay, we're ready.
Okay, so basically, as we discussed last week, we are basically looking at the various changes. That's the situational change,
Louder.
Just
Okay.
speak longer, sorry.
situational change, the institutional change, and the policy change. On our side, we are also going to look at the factors or the drivers of this change. So starting with the institutional change, we were looking at the support for the government. In the case of India, South Africa, and Brazil. Now, taking into consideration the number of people who actually are in support of what the respective governments are doing, we come to a realization that in the case of South Africa, that's according to the business tech reporting that was made recently, March 2017, realized that in the case of South Africa, starting from 2010, women's administration was having a citizen support of 46%. It's declined to 37% in 2011 and increased to 50% in 2012. Now, we also realized that after the aftermath of the 2012, there was a continuous downturn in the support of the people towards Zuma's administration. Now, in the case of Brazil, too, it's not that exceptional from the case of South Africa. Now, before, in the case of Brazil, around 2010, when President Inácio was in power, we realized that the citizen support for them was 46%. So there was a change in government in 2011 when Dilma was, pardon me if I don't pronounce the name very well, Dilma was to power. The Brazilians were more of thinking that since Dilma is in power, they confide in him that they are going to give their Muslim support to Dilma at the end of the day. But we realized that Dilma was not, she was not able enough to hold on to the support of the people for his government, because there's a lot of gross misconduct and incompetence and corruption scandals being attributed to Dilma's regime. So in 2014, Dilma was then impeached by the Brazilian parliament.
So just one thing I want to add on what Matthew said. If you look at the graph, this corresponds to the protests in these 3 countries. So for example, 2011, 2012, these were the main protest dates for India. So you see there's a gradual decline for the support of the Prime Minister. And then in 2014, there was a change in the Prime Minister, there was an election, and slightly it's been going, but then again it's decreasing a little bit. Same case with Brazil. Here, again, 2013 it started, and since then it's been going down. The protests are still happening, and that 2018 is going to be, the election time is going to be really an important date for them. So for Dilma Rousseff and impeachment and everything, the support is going down. Same thing for South Africa. With 2011, 2012, President Zuma's support is going down. So it corresponds to the protest dates.
May I clarify that? Because you say percentage of respondents who support the government. So we see in India, this is quite high, and both in Brazil and South African Republic, it's going down.
Yeah, India, it became high once the protests kind of ended. So like in 2014, there's no continuation of the protests that were happening then.
In India, was change of person, and in Brazil and
2013.
SAR was not.
Yeah.
Was the same.
So like in India, 2011 and 2012, they were the most important protest dates. And there is no continuation of these protests. But there are small protests happening everywhere. So the president, who was prime minister then, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he saw a gradual decline here. And 2014, he actually got removed from office because his people were very frustrated with the state at that point of time. Then the new prime minister came in, it's been going up, but again, there are clashes.
It's a completely new team in the government.
It's a completely new team.
This is the reason why, the respect grows.
Yes.
Okay.
But with South Africa and Brazil, you can see there's a gradual decline.
And where did you get that graph? Who was doing that?
I did.
Oh, okay. Based on what? What was your initial material?
So yeah, these are open sources from different places. So so there's a
because this is very important. If you do classification of some sort of processing materials which make up in the graph, it's important to describe how did you get to these numbers.
Yeah, for instance, we got some of the figures from Business Tech Report, which was published in March 2017. Then also have some from Gallup 2015.
So they were just polls, public polls?
Yeah, these
were
are
they
just
all by
polls.
Gallup or the other different firms doing
Yeah, different people did it differently.
But research center.
Yeah, there are like lots of sources, but generally this is kind of the trend. There are different sources, and in India actually the polls are quite notorious because it leaves out a huge bunch of people. Mostly they're online, sometimes on ground, but still a general pattern can be seen.
But you can certify that it's in a well-grounded information, that you can prove it if there will be questions. Good. Just want to be clear on that.
So with institutional change, the idea is that Brazil, India, and South Africa, they did not see any really drastic institutional change. They were all tagged free countries by Freedom House. At most, what these protests did were questioned the legitimacy of the entire institution of democracy. There were questions about democracy, and as a result, we can see there are some changes in the parameters, but not very drastic parameters, very drastic changes. So for example, if you look at political rights, then this graph is for political laws. So political rights remain the same. As far as I remember, it's Freedom House tagged them 2. One is for countries which are fully democracies. So 2 because there are issues with political corruption and other kinds of internal problems in the country. So they don't. They are somehow called flawed. This is it's called flawed democracy. These are not truly democracies. For laws and regulations in media, Brazil has always been high.
America for democracy.
But there are more laws and regulations on media. If you see, actually corresponds to the protest dates. 2012, it goes up again. And I'm not sure why it goes again in 2014. Maybe because change in the government structure, but that needs more investigation on why it actually went up in 2014. In South Africa, it goes up and down, but Brazil has constantly been high, which is quite interesting. It's not changed that much. Then same with media. If we look at the other things, political pressure on media, it's been constantly going up in all these three countries, and it's quite a steep graph for certain countries.
Because you're measuring the pressure on media. So it's not the
Freedom
pressure
House.
by media. It's like how political
Pressure.
system is trying
Affecting
to
media.
harass.
Yes. So, and also we can see there are, in Brazil, for example, there have been 2 occasions when the telecom companies were actually asked to block the social media WhatsApp. So there are different forms in which, there are in India too, you can see there are ways of removing, manipulating content. So maybe these are the reasons why they gave them worse rankings. The same thing on media. This is again on media, limits on content. And this is the total score for limits on content, political pressures, and everything. This is again on media. I can show you all the graphs in one place. So The Economist also called them flawed democracies. And in the case of South Africa and Brazil, the values are actually going down. That means it's not, for it to be a good democracy, it has to be over 8. But all these 3 countries come between the range of 6 to 7.9. And over time, there is a reduction in the grade for South African Republic and Brazil. So there are internal problems.
And there's gradation for full democracies, flawed and hybrid regimes.
Yeah.
You've taken all from economists. The notions and okay.
So this comes in this way. There's also something very interesting about political culture, which The Economist defines as a successful democratic. It defines a successful democratic political culture is someone that means the supporters end up accepting the judgment of the votes, and that's a very interesting graph that we got. That the people did not accept the case of Brazil the most. They couldn't accept the result of the votes in 2014. Same with
decline of democratic indices
yeah.
in Brazil and SAR connected with this contribution of this sub-index, yeah, especially.
Especially-
Why are they all in one point in 2014? What did happen at that period? So that they were all kind of concentrated in one spot and start digressing.
I don't know, actually.
I guess they have been making a kind of an observation the year that how in 2014 where their positioning is, the level of corruption. So
You can read the reports, economist
the level
reports.
of
Yeah, but they
Understand.
don't describe
Is not described by
why
this
this is.
increase. For sure, they have to.
No, why? Why all 3 are.
No, maybe
In
you
one
should
point.
look for all the economist indexes. I mean, not only for 2014 or 2013, but read them all from the very beginning, like 2008 or 7.
No,
or
if
when
you
they
will
began.
read the report of 2014,
Mhm.
they for sure describe this race, this change for
Yeah, there might be
Brazil
something.
and for India, yeah?
Mhm.
Not for SAR.
Indians, as far as I know, were very happy with the results of the votes in 2014. There was a huge shift. The new political party got huge number of votes. They were a majority. So that's why it's on the top. It's better than South African Republic and Brazil.
Okay. So in the case of policy change, we also look at the level of corruption in these 3 countries. And you realize that India is a country which is deemed as the most corrupt country comparatively among these three countries. South Africa is more or less the one with a very low corruption. But one thing about South Africa that we realized was that in the case of South Africa, I realized that they have a very strong anti-corruption policies as we move on. We're going to talk about it. But the issue about South Africa is that though they are having these strong anti-corruption policies, but when it comes to the implementation and enforcement of these policies, especially in the case of dealing with top political figures, it becomes very difficult to deal with such people. That is why when South Africans realized that Zuma has been using their state resources for his personal interest, building his own mansions, using state resources. Even as at now, though there's been a series of investigation in this particular issue, but no results as at now has been. They've not come out with any concrete results that yes, indeed, Zuma has actually taken state resources for his personal gain. Now, control of corruption. Now, as I already said, when it comes to the issue of controlling corruption in these countries, India has been one of the countries that, since though it's highly corrupt, but when it comes to coming out with anti-corruption policies, India is still not having strong enough anti-corruption policies in dealing with such activities in the country. As I already said about South Africa, though if you are talking about how to control corruption activities in the country, they have very strong anti-corruption policies, but it doesn't work when you are looking at top officials in the country. But when it comes to the grassroots level, let's say the street level bureaucrats, this anti-corruption policies is much applicable to these people as compared to the other two countries. Regulatory quality. Yeah, with respect to regulatory quality, I'm basically looking at how government formulates and implements sound policies to permit and also promote private sector development of businesses at the end of the day. So from the graph, we got to realize that South Africa is one of the countries as compared to, in comparative to other three countries, South Africa is having this kind of regulatory policy that checks how businesses are being run in the country as compared to Brazil and India. India, because of the corruption level of India, it becomes very difficult for such government regulatory policies to be implemented or enforced in these countries.
Yeah, so for factors of change, we've only done economic factors, in which basically, if you look at the graphs, you can understand a lot of things. So the graph is that this is the per capita graph. In this, India is definitely lagging behind the other two countries. But if we look at the growth rate, then it can be seen that Brazil and South African Republic are having major economic problems, while India is not. The growth rate is going up. It's quite high. Even now, it's around 7%. But Brazil and South Africa saw a dip here. In Brazil, there was actually an economic recession in 2010.
Profiles are very similar.
Yes.
I'm just trying to understand the similar trends.
Yes, and that's why economic problems, economic factors were the main reasons for the protests in Brazil and South Africa, but not so much in India. So that is something that was interesting. Inflation is high in both these two countries. Unemployment is high in both these two countries. And economic problems are the main drivers for Brazil and South African Republic protests. Yeah, that's it.
And it's one of the difficulties that you came to, you were facing was the fact that talking about the factors of change. For the economic factors, at least you're able to get something.
Important once again, factors of change, not of protests. Yeah? You're always trying to.
We were finding it very difficult to first of all, understand the factors of change from the political perspective. So that is why we are here. We want our professors to help us in getting much knowledge about talking about the political factors and the social factors.
Yeah, just if at all, I won't say about India because
Professor,
It-
your teacher call.
just in the case of South Africa, because Sambhavan has been handling it quite professionally. On the issue of South Africa, I must say that you need to check the period of Thabo Mbeki's one-term rule, and then the cleavage that African National Congress has faced. Okay, and then also check if you are talking about the factors for political change, you need to see the marginally looking but significant role of the diaspora community in South Africa. You might be surprised, but I think Sambhavan and you both might have read that for 2 months and a half, South Africa's parliament has been going through a major political upheaval because of Jacob Zuma's son was muddled into some financial corruption issue where an Indian businessman had given him a job to work as also some business partnership. And then Thabo Mbeki's group has been kind of campaigning against so that Zuma can be unseated. And Zuma has massive tribal support amongst the rural areas. Now, when you talk about these factors for political change, you need to see two out to it. Those who create the triggers, what are those triggers? Yeah?
Watchdog.
And basically those people who might have created it in the regions, you know, there's a democratic alliance they have created against African National Congress, and they made kind of headways. Yeah, they won a lot of elections, including the strongholds. Peter Maritzburg, in Johannesburg, in Durban, if you just check the data. If you come into the issues of, you check the negative things, that how things have started to fall apart. So there is a Pravin Godaria, he used to be the finance minister, okay? Pravin Godaria, if that's the family, that's the name. And he was considered as a very upright, very honest person, and he fought against this Gupta family